Hey guys, welcome to the Youth Fitness Podcast. Topics on youth fitness with a focus on doing what's best for kids. Brought to you by the Martin family, the developers of the Brand X Method, and the Athlete Coach Network.
Youth need great coaches now more than ever. Brand X has dedicated themselves to doing what is best for kids for over 2 decades and now offers mentoring, education, programming, and resources in one smart package to empower coaches to efficiently deliver world-class youth programs. Check out their plug-and-play options and join the Brand X family today. You plus Brand X equals youth program success. Hi, we're here for another Youth Fitness podcast, and we have the honor of having Jen Broxterman from Prosper Nutrition Coaching back with us today. And this is the 3rd time, and that's because, man, her information is just fantastic, and we think it's so valuable for coaches. So we're going to dig right in to our content today, which is going to be first about tips for building a healthy plate.
Well, I came prepared with a prop, and I have my good old healthy plate with me. So the reason I love the simplicity of this plate is I often like to kick it off, whether it's parents, teenagers, or younger children. Tell me what you notice. What is the first thing you see? So for those listeners who maybe can't see my visual, I'm going to have you guys describe back the plate that you see me holding up.
It's mostly vegetables, and I don't see good fats on there. That's what I notice.
Interesting. Okay. How about you, Jeff?
I would say it's divided into three parts. Half is vegetables, and then quarter starch, quarter protein.
You got it. So in its simplest form, the healthy plate is a plate that is about 50% of the plate being veggies, a quarter of it being protein, and a quarter of it being a healthy, ideally high fiber, slow digesting carbohydrate. Now, eagle eyes absolutely notice that there isn't a fat section depicted on its own. But generally speaking, foods aren't purely blocks of macros, right? You know, protein's going to have some fat to it, but there might be some oil or butter or dressing on a vegetable or in the carbohydrates. So we definitely don't want to shame fat. We want fat to be a part of our healthy meal. But what's so great about the plate is it's such a simplistic way to start to weigh in, am I eating in a way that's going to support my body's requirements? So if I think about a restaurant meal for a second, can I add the side garden salad to really keep that half the plate veggies? If I'm doing a homemade dinner, it's weird. I plan my dinners around my vegetables first. And ideally, I try to have 2 kinds or 2 colors on the plate as a minimum, and roughly about the size of one of my outstretched hands. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be as tall as the Eiffel Tower, but about an outstretched hand is a good point. Then we want protein, which is about the palm of our hand. It could be from animal, vegetarian, or vegan sources. And then lastly, the carbohydrate is very individualized to your level of physical activity. Think of carbs like gasoline in a car. A car that drives really far distances every day needs a lot more gas than a car that goes to the corner store and back. So we start with roughly a fist, but we can go up for athletes that need more energy and carbohydrate for their glycogen stores, or we go down a little bit for those that might be more carb sensitive, more sedentary, maybe having issues like pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. So this part I'm much more individualized, but the half veggies and the palm of protein is like our staple that glues it all together.
And does that transfer to a child's palm worth of protein and a child's hand?
You got it. If everyone listening were to look down at their hands right now, I'm going to guess that your hands are proportional to the height of your body. And actually, here's a fun husband-wife combo. Hold your hands up to one another and actually like touch hands for a second. Do you guys have identical hands? You do not. I see that Jeff's hands are a little bit bigger, as I would hope in the case like this. So what's cool is, generally speaking, genetically, our hands are going to grow in accordance with our body size, weight, and shape. So younger children can still have an outstretched hand of veggies of their current hand size, and their protein of their current palm, and their little fist of their current fist. But as bodies grow, limbs grow with it. So their portion size gets to grow. And remember that this is just a starting point. And I'll throw it in there super quick. We've done the division of responsibility in our couple past podcasts. Super simple line. Parents are responsible what the child eats, when, the time of day that the child's eating the food, and where, the location that the food is being served. The child side of the division of responsibility is how much, or the portion size, and whether or not to try what was offered from the family selection. So with their hands, you can start that as a guide. The parent decides what, when, where, but the child ultimately can determine the portion size, right? The whether and the how much. So that's a really nice way to just keep it super simple. We don't want our kids doing macros. We don't want young children weighing or measuring or counting calories. That is a definite no in pediatric dietetics. But the healthy plate applies to young kids as well. And the parents are hopefully role modeling this so that their children, their teens, their tweens are all sort of picking up these cues through their life cycle.
Excellent. That does reflect the activity that we did with the little kids, which was to talk about, we did talk about what is a protein, we discussed, and it was funny, of course, because lettuce is a protein. And, and once we determined that there were proteins and carbohydrates and fats, we would talk about what the relative proportion would be. We did avoid starches at the time, but that was sort of our perspective at the time. So we would have them draw on a paper plate as an activity what they were going to eat. And it was great. It helped them embed what actually is a protein, because we're talking about kids starting at maybe 5 years old who have no idea. And at least the school system here in the US does not necessarily ever tell them that.
Right.
So they need the information, especially if they have parents who don't talk about it. So they would learn what those things were and then kind of draw them on the plate. And it was pretty adorable. We could hang them up in the gym and then we could see the kids figuring out what that should look like. And that visual is so important. I love your prop there.
Thank you. And you know what? If for the gyms that maybe don't have a prop like this, I have a homemade version I did in under $3 from Walmart. I went and bought one of those white plates that have the dividing line already drawn in, just to kind of help keep the different foods separated on the plate. And then I bought a package of construction paper, and I took a smaller bread plate and I traced around green construction paper, red construction paper, yellow construction paper, and I just cut it out. And I, with a Sharpie, labeled vegetables, protein, starch, and taped it on with a piece of tape. And you can make yourself a healthy homemade plate model in under $3.
Fantastic.
When we used to lecture with the teens, talk with the teens, toward the end of before we shut down Brand X and moved across the country,
State.
we began encountering a lot of parents that were concerned about kids' weight. Early on in our gym, that just wasn't really a thing. And it was really helpful to divide carbohydrates up into vegetables and fruit, and then starches, and be able to talk to the parents and say, look, as much as a kid wants to have starch of vegetables and fruits, it's cool. What we have to worry about for the kids that need to worry about, or that are worried about their weight, we worry about the starches and how much of the starches they're eating. On the same token, if you have an athlete that is training and running 12 or 15 miles a day, they're going to need to increase the number of starches because they're just going to need that energy. And so it makes sense to me that this is kind of built this way.
When I often do sports nutrition talks to tweens and teenagers, this is an age group where this comes up a lot, sometimes even a bit younger. I always like to give a metaphor, because metaphors can be just a helpful way to storytell. As you know, I'm a fan of metaphors. And I talk about kids that are on competitive sports teams to maybe children that play house league or a recreational league. Now, if you think about it like a car and the distance you have to drive, you have to pull the car in to get gas more frequently the farther that car has to travel. So if you're really competitive at football or soccer or hockey or baseball or whatever it might be, you might have to drive 1, 2, 3 hours to find other athletes at your level to go compete against. So those athletes driving those far distances are going through much more gasoline to get to their game day. And so that's like the carbohydrate level. The much more output that your body does, the more units of carbohydrate, the gas to go in to fuel those muscles. Now, if you're a house league athlete who is playing very recreationally and maybe only has one practice a week and one game a week, and you only go out to your sport 2 times a week, well, that's a very different amount of gas to just go to your local community center to play soccer and then go right back home. So for children that are much more sedentary, they're maybe not doing as much high level athletics. They might be sitting more in school and not running around at recess. We have an increase in screen time for leisure behavior, after school into the evening. As a parent, we just kind of have to factor that in around how much is the car being driven. And we're not judging a child that maybe isn't as active. We're just helping to correct and match the amount of needed carbohydrate to that child output level. Just like I'll have male or female athletes who are really active, but if they overhear the messaging from parents or diet culture that carbs are bad, I'll have young high performance athletes that are definitely not eating enough carbs, and they're tired and they're getting injured and they're not performing well in school because they don't have the cognitive capacity, and they're afraid of carbs because they've heard the message that carbs are bad. So I don't really talk about them as good or bad. We talk about, just like the gas pump, there's 3 tiers. There's low price gas, there's mid price gas, and there's high price gas. High quality carbs are going to be mostly from nature. They're apples and bananas and quinoa and steel flake oats and all those sweet potatoes, right? Things that nature made that are going to give us lots of energy. Then we have kind of like level 2 carbs. They're whole grain, high fiber, but they were boxed or packaged. Whole wheat bread, whole wheat wraps, minimally processed low sugar cereal, that kind of stuff. And then we've got more the sometimes carbs that I call them joy carbs. Chocolate chip cookies, brownies, ice cream, candy, that kind of stuff. They're not bad, but we don't want that in the car's engine as the main form of gasoline fueling the car. Because the car, we want to be a Ferrari output, we want to put high quality gas into that body. So we have just different kind of tiers of gas. It's the way I talk about it with my younger athletes. And then what we do is we just match how much we fill in the tank to how much we drive the car around. So there isn't a right amount of carbs. It's how much is your car being driven?
That's a good metaphor.
It is. And it's solid. I mean, they get so much input from social media that's
right.
Crazy town dietary things, right?
Right.
So they need to have something very solid and something they can understand and simplify that's easy for coaches to transfer to parents. It's very easy for parents to transfer to kids.
Yeah.
So our second topic today is avoiding the sweet treat rewards culture. And what I mean by that, this is from the US perspective, and I'm sure you'll tell us about Canada and how it is there. But we have just gone crazy with schools and organizations using food as a reward system. And usually, typically, it's the yum stuff. It's the stuff we just talked about that we should limit all people. And they're using that, you got a math equation right. They're actually throwing candy across the room. And then every time there's a birthday, there's sweet treats. And it goes on and on and on. And parents ask us all the time, well, how do we avoid this? And we've heard some strange strategies, but effective, which is like, I just go and tell the school my child is sensitive to gluten or pre-diabetic. And then we let them know they're not allowed to have these things.
Right.
What are your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because when we think about, parents and children, of course, as much role modeling as possible has to start in the house. And the way that you make treats fit into a child's life without it becoming a big deal is you make the general food environment healthy whole foods. And once in a while, without a reward or punishment attached to them, treats, joyful food experiences just pop in. Right? It might be a, apple pie slice after Thanksgiving dinner. It might be the family's going out for an ice cream cone on a hot summer's day. You don't have to be good to earn them, and you don't have to get through something bad or icky like eating your broccoli to be allowed to have it. What we do is we keep it really neutral. Food is just food, but there's just certain foods that the parents choose to serve most often and frequently, whole food foods ideally. There are foods that come in only sometimes, those kind of middle category foods. And then there's joyful food experiences that are not bad, just the exposure, the percentage is much lower. than the other ratio of foods that the parents are presenting to their children. Now, when we're in a school or a sports environment where another decision maker is choosing to influence the foods in that way, it's tricky. Ideally, it's a little bit, I'm going to bring in an example of swearing. We don't want to make a big deal if a kid hears a bad word, because if we start to elevate that word, swear a lot more and think that word is really special, right? So if we keep calm and don't make such a big deal, remember that the majority of the time the child spends is at home with those parents under that food division of responsibility, food exposure. Now, if this starts to become a fairly large percentage of time, maybe it's a daycare, maybe it's school where every single day candy's being whipped out during math class, that may be appropriate to have a conversation with the food decision maker that has caregiving responsibilities with the child. And I always remember humans respond best when they're not attacked and it's not fear-driven. Prefrontal cortexes go offline when people feel threatened. So humans respond best when we just have a curious, open dialogue. And sometimes it might be fun to present something like the division of responsibility, like, hey, I was listening to this podcast. I'm kind of getting into pediatric nutrition. I've learned some cool stuff about this idea of parents and caregivers get to control the what, the when, the where. The children get to decide whether and how much. But we're trying to really encourage our son, our daughter, our child, to be mostly in a real food environment. Is there a way to have a discussion about the frequency? We're not against treats. We're not saying our child is not allowed to participate. We just want to make sure that from a frequency standpoint, this is maybe less than 10% of the foods they're exposed to on any given week, any given month basis. Can we check in on how often this is happening in the classroom, in this community event? And you pose it not in a threatening, judgmental way, controlling way. And it's also what I see as an adult dietitian is the kids whose parents completely ban the child from participating in these social, food is joyful. I actually see higher incidence of binge eating and lack of self-control because they hadn't had the chance to practice those skills with appetite regulation as a child. So that's why we're not elevating the value of the treats. We're just trying to minimize the percentage of the overall food environment that they're exposed, but we're not attaching negative messaging that is bad, the child is bad, the person serving that is bad. It's just the exposure is more minimal. Does that make sense?
Sense, yes.
Yeah.
And just we made all the mistakes over time,
Most parents do.
Be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But I love this. Really good.
The next podcast you come on, we'll tell you the mistakes and you can tell us what we've done, what happened to our children.
What traumas we caused.
Yes,
I would never judge, but it's only growth and learning. And I love the phrase, as you know better, do better. So if you're a parent listening to this going, oh my God, I was trying to micromanage and control, maybe you do like the phrase I used, which is like a joy food or joy experience. And food is very joyful. Sometimes we eat things just because a warm chocolate chip cookie tastes good for no other reason other than that was enjoyable. But if we can keep it in perspective that that's not how we eat all the time, and then it eliminates any shame when we engage in those types of food choices, it actually does the least amount of psychological damage, and we can grow up and walk away with a happy and healthy relationship with food, with exercise, and our body image.
I love that because you're considering biological, psycho, and social. So that just fits our world so perfectly.
Yeah.
And yes, we're going to have to do this again because we're out of time once more. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. And yeah, for any coaches who are looking to grab some more resources, I've got a ton of freebies for health and nutrition coaches. I'll have you guys link that in the show notes down below, and we'll just keep spreading positive nutrition messages like we have been.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Athlete Coach Network, a new connection-based training platform that breaks down regional barriers and connects coaches and athletes anytime, anywhere. You're an athlete and love to push yourself. Who's guiding you? As an athlete, you can filter and search our library to find the perfect coach, or sign up for a membership to get video feedback and comments from our coaches all over the world. As a coach, you can set up your profile and advertise your credentials, set your own price for video reviews or direct messaging to ensure your rates reflects the value of your time. Welcome to the Athlete Coach Network, and welcome to the future of sports coaching.
That was the Youth Fitness Podcast, topics on youth fitness with focus on doing what's best for kids. Brought to you by the Martin family, the developers of the Brand X Method and the Athlete Coach Network. We hope you guys enjoyed that episode and you listen for more.